We will agree on some issues, and quite frankly, some issues we will not agree on, and that's what a democracy is about. It's very important for you to not be a stranger in our offices, is that when you have a point of view, pick up the phone, call us, come in, schedule an appointment to see us, to talk about some of your concerns. If you're an advocate for this piece of legislation, we can sit down, we can talk about it. Because in that one bill that I mentioned, the big bill, I thought it was the 5254 is the numeral assigned to it. You've got business groups opposed to it. You've got labor groups opposed to it. And we have analysis of our bills when we look at a piece of legislation. We see who's for it. Of course, the environmental groups are for it, and then who's against it, and had an awful lot of folks against it. So that bill has a very, very tough road to hoe in the Illinois House. That means that you're going to probably have to negotiate with some of the folks, sit down and talk to them and see if we can come up to more of an agreed, I don't know if you can reach agreement on something like that, but at least come into where you have a shot at picking up some votes on that piece of legislation. Global warming is I'll tell you, when any legislator goes into the high schools now, that's what they ask me about. They say, what are you going to do about it? I get that question a lot. And I finally, sometimes I say to them, what are you going to do about it? What do you drive? A girl asked me last week, I believe, and she said she drives a SUV. Well, I said, I've had a boasting, I did it for economical reasons. I was the first member of the General Assembly to have a Prius, about 2 years, and Bob was saying, bet you're glad you got it, and I said, yeah, and I said the used car salesmen are calling me up now because there's an awful lot of folks who wish that they did that. But anyway, certainly there's a lot of things we can do ourselves, and so we don't have to dictate government action. I think, in fact, in our personal lives, we need to take the lead on it, whether it's using different light bulbs, recycling. We lost in Illinois, we've lost since 2002 about 600,000 manufacturing jobs. Now, I grew up here in Decatur, so when I graduated from high school in 1978, anyone can go out of high school and get a job at one of the factories. That doesn't happen nowadays. So we're in competition. We saw what Maryland did when they defeated that piece of legislation. I'm just going to be frank. We're in competition with all our neighboring states. And we certainly don't want to pass legislation that would impede some employer locating here in Illinois. I mean, I think that's important. So I was listening to the professor, and we'd certainly like to listen to some ideas in terms of, you said, the costs of doing something now versus later. Just come to the General Assembly, and we'll talk about it. Because I think that's an interesting, I kind of understood that, and I would be glad to talk to you about. So anyway, those are the things that I think, the challenges that we present in the General Assembly. I mean, someone said making legislation is about akin to watching sausage being produced. It's not a pretty sight. That is probably the case, but it's better than probably anything, I mean, the other types of systems that we have. We have a democracy. And certainly right now, I'm reading a book called The Millennial Makeover, which now, millennial generation, I believe, is anyone born after 1983. I've seen some friends of mine who were born after 1983. And that generation is certainly very much more environmentally conscious than mine was, and certainly than my parents' generation. So I come from my mother's family farm background. So I think if farmers are environmentalists because that's an asset that they want to pass down from generation to generation to generation. And so we're here in terms of members of the General Assembly to have a dialogue. We're not always going to agree. I'm the second time I've said it, but it's certainly something that I'm interested in. Certainly something I think not only is it's the right thing to do, quite frankly, I think it's going to be the political thing to do. And I know I am a politician, So you watch those numbers and see how those things work.
This is an extremely exciting time. I'm very excited, and I'm sure you are as well, when you think about the direction that we're headed and the recognition that we have that we need to save our planet, and we need to find ways to do that. And you know, we have at the local level, we have initiatives like Steve's working on. We have initiatives at the state level. And I want to tell you about some of the successes that we've had at the state level that Jonathan's probably not going to brag about, but I feel very good about. And we have something very good happening at the federal level. This is a part of a dialogue. And you know, my hope is that with the right set of circumstances this November, we're going to be seeing a dialogue on the environment and policies and actions that we haven't seen in a long time. So it's really a very, very exciting time, a watershed moment, I would say, for our nation. One of the things that probably was left unstated when we passed the electric utility reform bill last year, you may recall the state of Illinois restructured its industry, and the utilities sold off their power plants, and they then froze their rates for a while. And then when the power plants began selling at market prices, you saw what happened. The prices skyrocketed. And what happened is that in Illinois, there was a movement around the nation in the 90s to go to this new competitive environment. And what happened was we had a situation in California where the lights virtually went off due to a combination of unfortunate circumstances, and the rest of the nation stopped. But here was Illinois ahead of the game, trying to be ahead of the curve. And so we had to make the best out of the situation. So here we are in Illinois with an abundance of coal in the ground. Unfortunately, haven't been able to find too many ways to burn it efficiently or environmentally safely. Yet we have all this coal in the ground. So we have initiatives like FutureGen that are being discussed so that we can, you know, find ways to use Illinois coal. But it's a political battle. And but back in Illinois, here with this restructuring, no utility company or no generation company is building power plants anymore, because the old days of building your power plant, getting them put in rate base, and getting them put into the utility rates are over. So what we have is this unfortunate policy of gas peakers. And, you know, let's build another peaker, get another, you know, 100 megawatts here and 100 megawatts there. And so now what we're seeing is the price of oil is going up, and with the price of oil, we're in a pretty good, we have some pretty good opportunities. And we in Illinois and the rest of the nation have to take advantage of the situation to make sure that we have alternative energy sources available to us. One of the things I'm very, very proud of, and we worked very hard on the utility restructuring bill that will help modify some of the rate increases that people will see. But I want to tell you that in that legislation, and currently in the law right now, and you need to give Jonathan and his colleagues in Springfield credit for this, that in the future, when power plants are being built and utilities are buying power, they are going to be required to include a certain percentage of renewable power in their portfolio. So for example, by 2009, they'll have to have 4% renewables, 5% by 2010, 6% by 2011, and it ramps up to 25% by June 1st, 2025. And to the extent that it's available, 75% of the renewable energy resources used to meet those standards will come from wind generation. That's something that, you know, you don't necessarily hear about, read about, most people don't, you know, talk about, but that's really significant when you think about it. So, you know, now when you talk about green power, you talk about, you know, everybody's sort of getting on this bandwagon, whether it's General Electric or some of the bigger companies that we're seeing, they're on this bandwagon. And now, as long as these companies think they can make a buck at this, we're moving in the right direction, because they're seeing some market-based opportunities to clean our environment, because that's what people want. And so, in a sense, it's in incremental ways that we make progress that we're going to be able to clean our environment. And I think that we have the knowledge, we have you here tonight, you know, working to try and make a difference. And in the future, you know, because of your interest, because of this push, because of you wanting to save this planet for future generations, we're going to be making much better decisions than we ever would have before. And so this is how change often occurs in Springfield, in Washington, and locally.